So on behalf of the Global Association of Masters in Development Practice Programs and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, welcome to the 2015 International Conference on Sustainable Development. I am... Do you feel this? This is anticipation and excitement. Excellent, I feel it vibrating off of you. So, this conference is called Implementing the SDGs, Getting Started. I am your moderator for the first part of this morning. I am Femi OK. I have a few things to tell you before we really get stuck into the conference. You will see this program. I'm sure you have this program, an amazing lineup. What the program doesn't have is all of you in it and all of you watching online. How to do that is hashtag ICSD 2015, hashtag ICSD 2015. I'm telling you this because there'll be people on the stage that you can ask questions to, but you have to ask your questions using that hashtag. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short question and answer session without you taking part. So I'm looking forward to that. You will notice that I am holding my badge. Don't do what I'm doing. Wear your badge. Your badge is your entry, your ticket into this room. I want you to feel comfortable in this room. This room is going to be your home. We are starting a few minutes late. That's the only time we're going to do this in the entire 2 days. The coffee breaks, the lunch breaks do come back nice and early so that you can see all the amazing people that we have lined up for you. Now, I want to see how awake you are. I just say good morning. You say good morning back to me. I'm going to tell you the people without whom we would not be able to have this conference. And when I finish the list, I know you will raise the roof and make them feel very happy that they helped us do this. So, Dr. Betsy Parker Sill, Michael Politzer, PepsiCo, Munich Ray, Columbia World Leaders, the Kapuscinski Development Lectures. Thank you so much for allowing this conference to happen. If you have never experienced a Kapuscinski lecture, you are in for a treat. If you have, you are also in for a treat. Here to tell you why, the Deputy Director General of International Cooperation and Development at the European Commission, Klaus Rudischhauser. Klaus, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this special edition of the Kapuscinski Lectures. The Kapuscinski Lectures is a privilege that we have to organize together with the United Nations Development Program, and we have had more or 70 of those over the last year since 2009. And in the meantime, we can reach 20,000 people because we also web stream these. But before saying more about this, I would really like to thank the organizers, and in particular Columbia University, for hosting this event and actually for setting aside part of the 2-day program of this conference aside for this, what is a special Kapuscinski lecture. Normally we have one speaker at the Kapuscinski lecture. Today we have a whole series. I will come to that later. But we are very honored to have very, very important guests today. Now, why are we doing this? We, the European Union, are one of the largest development actors in the world. I'm not going to quote figures, but we are definitely, together with our member states, in any case, the largest provider of development assistance for the last many years, and we will continue to do so. This means that we are also very keen to reach out and work with all other stakeholders, and in particular with academia. This is very important for us and is one of the key reasons why we are very keen to do the Kapuscinski lectures. And secondly, we are very keen to reach out to young people, because as we all know, it is actually young people that will be the main implementers of the SDG agenda, that are those that are going to benefit from the success that we all hope to see. 2015 is in Europe the European Year for Development. And we have declared this year as the European Year for Development because we wanted to engage more in a dialogue with all areas of civil society on development. This is very important for us, and we have there also, in the European Year for Development, put the emphasis on dialogue with young people. So another good reason also to have all of you here today. Today we are very honored to have very distinguished guests with us. Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Irina Bokova, Jan Eliasson, Amina Mohamed, Peter Bakker, Stephen Groff, Professor Savas Alpay, James Hansen, and Johan Rockström. And I really would like to thank all these speakers for having accepted to participate in the event this morning. This lecture takes place on the eve of an exceptional event. In just 2 days, the summit, the UN summit will adopt the 2030 Agenda for Development, and the EU and its member states have played a very strong role in negotiating this agenda. Therefore, we are very proud of the achievement, and I think that we can all congratulate ourselves that it has actually been possible to get all the countries of the world to agree to this agenda. I think this is a remarkable event, and therefore 2015 certainly will be remembered for this. I will not go into the detail. Most of you will have studied the SDGs, and we will learn a lot about what this means from this morning's conference. The Kapuscinski Development Lectures have been called Kapuscinski Development Lectures in honor of Ryszard Kapuscinski, who is a Polish writer who very early on traveled around the whole globe and documented the life in particular of poor people and wrote about poor people. And so we have, together with UNDP, chosen to call these lectures in his honor. They provide students, NGOs, the media, academia, in fact anyone who's interested in development, with an opportunity to learn and discuss more about development issues of the day. We are trying to use them to bring together academia and policy makers, and I'm sure that today's speakers will precisely do that, will talk from the academic point of view and from the policy makers' point of view, and I think this is really very important and is one of the key objectives of this activity. So I think we are all here today to listen, to debate, and to reflect about how to implement the SDGs. And in order to get us started, I now have the honor to invite Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, President of Liberia, to the stage for a keynote speech.
Good morning. Deputy Secretary General Eliasson, fellow panelists, excellencies, distinguished participants, our young participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be a part of this today, to participate in this third international conference on sustainable development, to discuss the new global sustainable development agenda and practical strategies for implementation. It is very inspiring to see an audience with such a large number of young people, as it will be you, the young people, who will be the torchbearers of the new Sustainable Development Agenda. We have traveled a long road to reach this historic moment. In September 2000, the UN Millennium Summit endorsed the Millennium Declaration, which was signed by more than 180 countries. In 2002, the declaration was translated into quantifiable and time-bound goals to end human suffering from poverty, hunger, and disease, to ensure environmental sustainability, and to form new global partnerships. In 2012, the UN Secretary General appointed a high-level panel of eminent persons to consider what might constitute a successor framework to the MDGs. He urged us to consider the most pressing development challenges of the 21st century. I had the great pleasure of co-chairing the panel alongside Prime Minister David Cameron of the United Kingdom and President Bang Bang Yudhoyono of Indonesia, together with 24 other high-level persons from academia, government, the private sector, and civil society. We put forth a set of 12 potential goals encapsulated in our report, A New Global Partnership. Concurrently, the UN established an intergovernmental process under the Open Working Group and subsequently launched a full intergovernmental negotiation. This eventually resulted in the 2030 agenda, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that will be agreed upon by the heads of states and government on September 25th, just 2 days from now. This rally will be a historic moment and will be the result of so many of these here, so many right in this front row, the panelists that have worked so hard to make this day come to pass. There will be, during that time, more heads of states and government at the United Nations General Assembly than has been since its very founding. It will be a unique window of opportunity to set the world on a safer, more sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous path. But more importantly, the new agenda has been shaped by you, each and every one of you, the world's global citizens. Through widespread global consultations, we have heard from men and women, old and young, rich and poor, from the global north and the global south. Thanks to the power of modern information communication technologies, over 8.5 million people have voted on their priority concerns via the Mind World Survey. The end result is an agreement that truly reflects the diversity of global opinion. And yet, in spite of that diversity, we have managed to craft a coherent, ambitious vision for the world in 2030. A world without extreme poverty, a world without hunger and acute deprivation, a sustainable world that will generate prosperity and well-being for all people through economic and social transformation. It is our vision of an interdependent world where we recognize that problems in one place will affect us all. We have negotiated the outcome not as North-South, East-West, poor and rich, but as members of one humanity with a common destiny. The belief that we are all one shared humanity, part of an interconnected world, was brought into sharp focus by the recent Ebola epidemic that ravaged my home country, Liberia, as well as our neighboring countries across West Africa. The Ebola virus killed more than 4,000 people across my country and has affected many, many more. Families have been torn apart by this earth-shattering illness that emerged on us so very quickly. The global health community was left dumbfounded. It is beyond doubt that the virus has exposed a great number of weaknesses in our health system, in the number of trained health workers, our disaster preparedness, and regional cooperation, as well as the broader response of the international community. But it has also demonstrated the power of global collective action. Working together in partnership with you, my American brothers and sisters, and thanks to the immense generosity and support of the United States Congress, we have managed to drastically reduce the number of new cases each month, and we are now working to build an essential frontline health service. With your help, Liberia has been able to train a network of community health workers as contact tracers who track down people who have been exposed to the virus and monitor their symptoms. Community by community, our most important assets. Religious leaders, tribal leaders, women and youth groups, businesses, civil society, and many, many more from across Liberia's 15 political subdivisions have fought back. And so today, we can say that we are reclaiming our future that was once threatened by this deadly disease. Today, we are Ebola-free. We can enjoy the lifting Thank you. Just yesterday, the United States lifted the sanctions on travelers from Liberia, thereby concretizing our status of freedom. The collective spirit that we experience is at the heart of the new Sustainable Development Agenda. It is about one humanity, one world, working together to tackle the most intractable problems of the 21st century. Through our collective skills, training, and ingenuity, we can develop technologies, approaches, and interventions to surmount any challenge. Crucial to the success of this long-term agenda is data and information. We need to know where the poorest and most vulnerable are, what services and support they need, and the opportunity and challenges they face. This has to be a cornerstone of our expanding Ebola response. As we take our first steps, all of us, one world, toward a sustainable future, we must monitor where we are starting from, where we are aspiring to get to, and must have the requisite information at our fingertips to make informed, evidence-based decisions. That requires considerable improvements in our national data and information systems. Thankfully, a data revolution is underway, which, combined with new information communication technologies, is providing a whole new toolbox of data collection, compilation, and analytical approaches. We do live in an interconnected world with 7 billion mobile phone subscribers and more than 3 billion internet users. When coupled with remote sensing from satellites and other sensors and monitors, the flow of information is relentless and overwhelming. Private companies have learned to tap into the opportunities afforded by the data revolution. But the global development community has been slower to respond and benefit. Through more effective use of smart data collected through service delivery, economic transactions, or remote sensing, sustainable development can indeed be accelerated. The fight against extreme poverty can be bolstered, and the global energy system can be made much more efficient and less polluting. Vital services, such as health and education, can be made far more effective and far more able to reach those who are currently excluded. This is the kind of technological revolution that is going to change the face of global development. It is going to equip us to end extreme poverty once and for all and ensure that no one is left behind. Working together in global partnerships, capitalizing on the power of new technologies, new data systems, and collective action, I am confident that we will embark on a transformative development agenda that secures the future of both people and planet in this generation and for the many thereafter. I ask each of you in this room today to become a part of this global partnership, to strive to support a more sustainable, just, and inclusive world, to ensure that this new world order, sustainable development goals, is implemented for you and because of you. With this, our generation might be able to say that we can end poverty. And yours, you, the young people in this room, assembled here today, will be the one that will be called upon to meet the challenge of sustaining our planet for years to come. I thank you.
If you'd like to take a seat just here. Thank you, Madam President. Now, I'm sure you have questions for her, And now is a good time for me to remind you that hashtag ICSD2015 is how you are able to talk to the President of Liberia and all of the other speakers that we have coming up in just a moment. Obviously, you have to be on topic. You cannot ask Madam President where she shops for her shoes, but you can ask her about Liberia and the Sustainable Development Goals and how she intends to get started. That's one question there, just for free. So, let me tell you, if you're just joining us online, this is the 2015 International Conference on Sustainable Development. Welcome, you have very good taste. So many things to look online and you're watching here. I thank you for that. So, the Director of Sustainable Development Solutions Network, the Director of the Earth Institute of Columbia University, the Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General of the MDGs, all one person, not three people, by the way. This person is Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Now, I can assure you that he is a man of few words when he's asleep. When he's awake, he has an urgency and passion and infectious energy and enthusiasm that you're about to witness. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, the podium is yours.
Wow. Femi, thank you. I think that was a way of saying be brief. And I will be brief to say what a thrill it is to have everybody here. This is, and to have President Sirleaf with us. We admire you so much, and we're so grateful for you being here and with the other leaders that you're about to hear. This is a big day, and it's a really big week. And I think the excitement is palpable. We have not only this huge hall filled, our largest at the university. We had 1,000 students show up last night for an SDG rally. Thank you, students, for being here. Whoever, many are here today for hearing from the leaders and from the science presentations that will be here today and tomorrow. And of course, it's incredibly cool that Pope Francis is here and coming to town. And it just doesn't get better than that, actually. We are at a turning point. We have to be, but I think it's actually happening. We're at a turning point because for decades now, we've been doing some things amazingly well and other things amazingly stupidly and dangerously. And we got to clean up our act. The good thing that has happened over the last generation and can continue into the next generation is that a lot of the mystery of economic growth and development has been successfully unlocked. The world economy, despite all the ups and downs, actually works quite well for producing broad increases of economic growth. And in some cases, even miraculous increases of economic growth, like China has experienced over the past now 37 years, in fact, since Deng Xiaoping came to power in 1978, and it's wonderful that President Xi Jinping is coming to the United Nations and helping to lead, especially to lead, by the way, a meeting on gender equality on Sunday, so it's very, very exciting. Great progress. Poverty has come down sharply during this period. Keep that in mind. Technologies have really made it possible, as President Sirleaf said, to have the poor not in isolation, but as increasingly part of a global world economy that has dynamism, and we're living in a period of technological revolution. That's the good news. The bad news is we've been dumb and nasty to each other. The dumb part is that despite warnings from scientists now for decades, and I'm looking at our leading climate change guru in this country, and I would say, the world, Professor James Hansen, who you're going to hear from, and one of the greatest leaders who has been telling us for decades the truth of how risky this is. We still have not taken heed. 23 years after signing the climate agreement, still no global agreement on how to implement it. This is dumb, dumb. That's, by the way, why it's so important that Pope Francis is speaking to the US Congress, which is our seat of dumbness these days. And we've been mean, unfortunately. We've been mean because all this wealth, and as a macroeconomist, that's the one thing I can really tell you, we are so rich in this world. Within a radius of about 4 or 5 miles of here, there are more than 40 billionaires. On the island that we are located, it's the highest concentration of wealth in the entire world. And there's a lot of it. We're now a $106 trillion per year world economy. And yet we're mean, because tiny, tiny fractions of that could save millions of lives, end epidemic diseases, make sure that every child has a decent education. If we would just think a little bit about being nice. And that's also why Pope Francis's message is absolutely reaching the entire world, because most people are nice. But as Lord Acton said, once they come to power, something happens, actually. And power really does corrupt many people. Fortunately, not the wonderful president I'm standing next to, but it's a danger. And if we could be nice and smart, then we could really harness this great productive machine that we have to solve some massive challenges and also produce some wonderful outcomes in the world. Well, that's the combination that is being adopted unanimously by the 193 world governments on Friday afternoon. Sustainable development means harnessing the economic development, combining it with social inclusion. That means everybody gets to be part of this, and environmental sustainability. That's the beauty of this. What's amazing, I don't really know it exactly, but we had some miracle workers here, and you're going to hear from one of them, Mina Mohammed, who has been coordinator on behalf of another leader you're going to hear, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Jan Eliasson. Something happened which violated a fundamental theorem of mine, I can tell you. I had a theorem which worked perfectly, by the way, for decades, which said that if you give the UN a certain amount of time to do something, it will use every second of it to negotiate that up till the last moment, cliffhanger, all-nighter, and then something will happen. But this agenda of sustainable development that's being adopted on Friday, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, were concluded weeks in advance of this Friday, on August 2nd. Why? You know why? I could see it in the eyes of the ambassadors at the General Assembly over the last 2.5 years. When they'd meet, everybody knows this is for real now. Everybody knows it. There's not a place on the planet that is not destabilized environmentally right now. There's not a place on the planet that is not grappling with the consequences of desperately poor people, desperate people on the move, all of the social stresses and instabilities coming for this. So even though governments rarely agree on anything in this world, and getting them to agree is a tremendous lift, This is 193 governments that agreed on a wonderful agenda, just right, putting the 3 pillars together, and did it before the scheduled date of Friday. Now, the final word I want to say is that gives us all a very wonderful, indeed unique opportunity, and it gives us all a huge responsibility. These 17 Sustainable Development Goals will not be made by governments, believe me. Governments can do some constructive things, but the gift of the SDGs is that they're for the public. This is not a technocratic exercise. This is not for the lawyers. This is not for the negotiators. This is for us. Every part of society now needs to respond. There's no one in charge, by the way. Truly, nobody. The world's much too complicated. The only way we can coordinate is that we now have shared goals for the next 15 years. I feel for us at Columbia University, and I do want to speak on behalf of universities around the world, we have an obligation now to respond. We have a responsibility as a university and as all universities around the world. There's so much knowledge, so much scientific expertise, so much engineering expertise, so much policy analytics, and especially so many bright, brilliant, energetic young people that if an institution like this can't respond centrally to this global challenge, it's not going to work. So the message is use these 2 days well at this conference. Network, work, tweet every minute or so. The SDGs should be trending during this day. Learn, go home in your own universities, your own classes, your own businesses, say, what are we going to do now? We're not waiting. Where's our Earth Institute? Where's our SDG Institute? Where's our SDSN youth movement? Where is our city's sustainable development plan? And by the way, how exciting that New York City has a sustainable development plan, One NYC, and that the mayors and Governor Jerry Brown and others are going to be coming here in a couple of days, and they're going to be telling that at the city level they're taking this on. So this, finally, I want to say, the 17 goals, if you don't know them by heart right now, get on your phone, look at them, know them by heart by lunch. Okay, I'm going to come around and quiz you. Okay? It's not so hard. I was terrified of 17. As my colleagues at the UN will know, for 2.5 years I said, no, not 17, make it 10. We only had 8 Millennium Development Goals. And then it turned out when the governments wanted 17, absolutely, and I looked in front of a mirror and tried to remember 17, it wasn't that hard. It's possible. I just kept seeing Moses coming down with 4 tablets. It just seemed too much. But anyway, we'll live with 17. You can remember them. Know them by lunchtime. I'm not kidding. Because then, first of all, you'll be the first in your family to know them for sure. You'll impress your mom, your dad, your sisters, brothers, your kids. Very important. And then you can actually champion them. And you need to champion them. And the second thing is, with all that heart, keep all of the science and engineering and the technical issues here. This is the marriage of science and heart. It's not only the spirit to do it, it's having brilliant scientists like Jim Hansen or Johan Rugstrom, who's sitting here, helping to guide technically what are the planetary boundaries, what are the limits, what should be done. It's like having wonderful engineers like Professor Vijay Modi of our engineering school saying, here are the new technologies that can really make the difference. It's like having you writing new apps to make this work in local contexts, local languages around the world. So it's the marriage of the heart, the science, the knowledge. Let's do it. Thank you very much. Oh, I had another job, a fun one. I'm not going to let you do it.
Okay.
It's my turn to introduce a wonderful world leader and a very dear friend and a very courageous and campaigning leader for wonderful causes of education for all, science for all, and world culture and understanding. In my view, UNESCO, which is the education, science, and cultural organization of the world and of the UN system, sits at the very heart and soul of the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. Education, if I had to name one of all of these goals, and by the way, that's SDG 4, education for all. You all know that by now, I know. That is the #1 way to success. And so it is an incredible honor to have with us the Director General of UNESCO, and she's a great world leader, Irina Bokova.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for these kind words you started, and I was thinking, who is this great leader here in the room? And while listening to you, I was thinking that indeed life is not fair. I have to speak after Jeff Sachs. And also after another great leader, President of Liberia, Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. And I was thinking also that indeed the passion, the commitment, the knowledge, the anger even of both of them contaminates all of us. And I would like to thank both of them for this wonderful leadership, and also to say that what is more important nowadays, that opening young minds towards the Sustainable Development Agenda and everything that we at the United Nations want to achieve for the world. So I would like indeed to thank you, Jeff, for this invitation, for organizing this important meeting this morning, this conference. And we know that today is a quiet day at the United Nations because we have the Eid al-Adha at the headquarters and it is closed. But just in 2 days, indeed, we will see a historic moment. A historic moment with the adoption of the post-2015, the Sustainable Development Agenda that has been in the making for the last at least 3 years after the Rio +20 conference, and I would say even before, of thinking how we achieve the Millennium Development Goals and what is next for humanity. And I know that we all of us are brimming with excitement. I see this excitement here also in the room when the world leaders will be gathered at the United Nations headquarters. And I would say that being part of the United Nations family, UNESCO, with all the other agencies, funds, programs, working together under the leadership of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and I think we should pay a special tribute to the Secretary General because he was relentless. He was relentless in this effort. He was urging world leaders. He was putting forward initiatives. He was gathering panels, like the panel on sustainable development that President Sirleaf Johnson mentioned of sustainability. He organized the Rio +20 conference, as equally as he's urging now leaders to take up all the responsibility for another major event later this year in December in Paris, the COP21, the climate conference. And I think this is important as of now to put these two big agendas together, the agenda of sustainable development and the agenda also of the climate change. As Jeff mentioned, we cannot look the Sustainable Development Agenda, we cannot take it forward unless we also look at it from the optics of the decisions in Paris later this year. And we know that the goals, the 17 goals, represent a most universal, ambitious, comprehensive agenda the international community has ever adopted to eradicate poverty, to redress inequalities, to advance women's rights and women's empowerment, to advance human rights and dignity, and to leave no one behind. And I think the United Nations have never seen such broad consultations and consultations in partnerships. And this is where I want to pay tribute to the role played by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Here is where I see one of the first lessons that we want to draw, and one of the first actions that we want to take the world and the United Nations forward. Because this is a unique agenda, as we say, and it is a unique agenda, and the delivery and the solutions also should be unique. I see here several directions for crafting new alliances. We all say business as usual does not work. We need to move beyond the traditional view of development. Development is not a charity. Development is not about those who give and those who receive. It is indeed about public policies, about global decisions, about truly universal partnerships. Partnerships between governments, society, civil society, academia, and the private sector. I think, in fact, this is what this conference also is all about. It is about partnerships that stir innovation, inclusion, and ownership. We need also to call for sustained and innovative financing, drawing on all resources, including domestic, emerging economy donors, mobilizing effective means of implementation, connecting also the dots together. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are closely interlinked. Each one has an impact on the other. And this is where partnerships can play a critical role. We have to put together, to connect education with health, technology, all relevant sectors, and the environment. I'm convinced this places a premium on the strengths of many of our partners, of many partnerships that will emerge. And from the point of view of UNESCO, an organization that, and I'm very glad that Professor Sachs mentioned, our agenda is at the heart of sustainability, talking about education, about knowledge, about inclusiveness, about lifelong learning, about quality, is one of the basic prerequisites, in my view, of achieving the 17 Millennium Development Goals. I think we cannot achieve gender equality without empowering women and girls through education. And this is what we have done, leading the global negotiations and discussions on the goal number 4, inclusive, quality education for all and lifelong learning. I think this is extremely important. It is important also to put the dots between the different initiatives on innovation, on new technologies, ICTs, open educational resources, everything that the new technologies can bring to the world and to the implementation of this agenda. But I think we cannot do that if we don't look also in how science and technology changes the world and how it can improve the poverty, how can it eradicate poverty, how it can improve social inequalities, redress social inequalities. And I think one of the key mechanisms for doing this is to empower governments to take the right decisions in the area of education, science, and technology. And of course, we all say that governments have the prime responsibility of delivering on the right to education, to ensure efficient, equitable, effective management, financing of public policies and public education, because education is a public good. It is not a charity that we give to the young people. And this is where I believe the framework for action that we have adopted in the Global Education Forum in Incheon earlier this year gives the keys to understanding why it matters and how we can make it a truly inclusive process. And I believe also what we have designed in the Global Education Forum is a new form of action. But as I said, the same is true for science, technology, and innovation. We need a more robust policies, national policies on science, technology, and innovation. We need also, as it was mentioned in the Addis Ababa Agenda for Action, where the issue of financing for development was discussed, we need also to make a change in recognizing science, technology, and innovation as an end in itself, as a goal in itself, and then, of course, as an important mean on the agenda. It goes for greater investment in STEM, investment in STEM for girls, for women, national strategies, facilitating also and transferring STI solutions. So this is where we're working. 9 agencies from the United Nations under the leadership of UNESCO have created a technology facilitation mechanism. We have agreed, and it will be launched at the high-level summit here at the United Nations as well. So increasing investment and technical support for the sustainable management of water resources, of science and technology innovation is indeed also one of the important goals. So just to say my last word, I think the 17 goals, the ambitious goals that we are adopting this year are truly transformative and universal. They are, I think, what is most important, owned by governments. And ownership is a key word when we speak about finding the right solutions and implementation. We have to empower governments. We have to give them the right tools, the best practices, the normative action, the data. We have to give all the possibilities for them to act for the benefit of their own peoples. And this is where the role of the United Nations, the role of the academia, the role of the civil society, and including the private sector is so important. Because as I started at the beginning, partnerships are key. And if we really want to see what President Sirleaf Johnson mentioned just at the end of her speech, that we have to work for one humanity, one world. We live in a planet under pressure. It is seen now from all the research, and we will see even more evidence at the end of the year during the COP21 conference that there is an urgency in our action. We cannot postpone some of the decisions for after, for better times. We cannot postpone some of the decisions and actions that we have to take to eradicate extreme poverty, because people want better lives. People are on the move. Refugee crisis, migration crisis, conflicts, all this is part of the current day problem. And some of these refugees are climate change refugees. They're refugees from conflicts and also from climate. So in order to tackle the core, the basis of these issues, we really have to go down to development, to eradicate poverty, to strengthen effective national, regional, and other policies in order to bring about the development that we want to have. So both ambitions, post-2015 agenda, development goals, and climate change agreement, hopefully to be achieved in December, I think are the big 2 agendas this year that we have in front of us. And I think we can manage. Nothing is predestined. If we have the right policies, if we have a true partnerships and understanding globally, we can do it. So once again, thank you very much, Columbia University, Jeff, for organizing this meeting. Let's get started, as is the logo of your conference. Thank you.
Join us on the stage. Sit next to Jeff. Thank you very much, Irina Bokova. So, I'm just seeing it's almost lunchtime. There's a couple of hours to go. SDG number 4 is education. Okay, so you were listening. SDG number 1 is...
Yeah.
Ooh. And number 2 is... Oh my goodness, are you reading this off your phones? Are you cheating? All right, so it's really nice to have 3 people who already have spoken to actually ask them some questions. I'm going to do this quick fire style, if I may, Madam President. So, what have been the greatest challenges for Liberia in developing and working on the SDGs? That question came from Johnny.
Ensuring that our communities understand the goals, take ownership of implementing those goals within the context of their own environment, using the experience of Ebola when they came together with determination. Our challenge will be to ensure that we have the means of understanding it and supporting them to take charge of the process as it affects their lives in their communities.
Thank you. A lot of questions about youth participation, how we can get young people into this process. For you, Irina, how can world leaders ensure youth participation in decision-making and implementation of the SDGs?
I think it is critical that young people participate, because we know that the world is young. More than half of the population is under the age of 20. We see regions, I'm talking about Africa, I'm talking about many other emerging countries. The population is even, young people are even 60% of their population. I think the first priority, of course, should be giving them education, giving them skills, giving them the competencies, giving them, I would say, the sense of global citizenship. Our agenda for education, global number 4, and I hope now after you learn the 17 goals, please look further on the targets. Because if you look on the targets, if you go deeper in education, you will see there we have put education for global citizenship. And this is where young people can play a critical role. This is knowledge about the environment. This is changing mentality. This is living with each other, living together. This is cultural competencies. This is knowing about the world, the tolerance. And I think the young people who are most sensitive about these issues can be, if they're empowered, they can make a huge difference to the world.
Jeff, global goal number 14, that's my question, is what?
Global goal number 14 is protecting the marine ecosystems.
Wow.
The oceans.
What do you think?
This is the best party trick for the next 15 years.
Absolutely.
All right, so here's the real question. There's a lot of mystery around the word technology, what technology, and how it can actually help in eradicating poverty. Where's technology's role, Jeff?
You know, if you look at any of the progress that humanity has made, starting with hominids 2 million years ago mastering fire, then mastering agriculture, inventing the steam engine, and today our information technology, this has always been the key to progress, to longer lives, to healthier lives, to more knowledge. We're living in what's sometimes called the 6th great technology wave that is built on information technology, on mobile communications, on Moore's Law now operating for more than 50 years. So we've had a more than billion-time improvement in the ability to store, process, and transmit data. That means that this is just the most fun thing in the world. And it's amazing what can be done. Now, if you log on to EdCast, that's an advertisement for the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, my course is on your phone for free, okay? This, to my mind, not just that course, and Johan's course is on this phone for free anywhere in the world. What we can do with technology is absolutely transformative right now. We have Uber in the city, very convenient. We need Uber Health throughout Africa and other low-income settings. When you need the ambulance, you press the button, GIS tells the driver where it is, it's there, it's logged into prepayment with the health system. Somebody write the app at home for this. You'll also become a billionaire, by the way. So the truth is, just to finish with one more example, when the Millennium Development Goals started, MDG 6 was to control epidemic diseases, of which malaria was, at that moment, in the headlines. We had bed nets that were newfangled technologies that needed to be treated every 3 months by re-treating them in insecticide wash. Then came along Sumitomo Chemical, said, our engineers figured out how to put the insecticide inside the resin so that when you knit the net, it now lasts 5 years. Unbelievable. Changed everything. Then a couple of years later, the phone started, and then we could have community health workers out in the communities. Then what came along? A rapid diagnostic test. Instead of a microscopist needed in a clinic 10 kilometers away, you just take 1 drop of blood and an antigen test tells whether the child has the infection. Malaria is down 70% now. And technology and mobilization made it possible. So the point is, go through the 17, surely you know SDG 15 by now, SDG 9, SDG 7, so you'll see how technology is absolutely critical for them. But it's the young generation that knows actually how to use this the best. So do it. 10 years, we have 1.5 billion people on Facebook. What about having 7 billion people on SDG Book? Figure out what that should be.
All right. We're going to move on with the program. Professor Jeffrey Sachs is going to introduce the next speaker, Irina Bokova from the UNESCO. Thank you very much for joining us on stage. Madam President, thank you for joining us on stage. Please take your seats.
Wow, I'm having all the fun today because I get to make another introduction of one of our most important world leaders and an individual that is charged in the UN system with bringing about that consensus that has indeed arrived. That is our Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Jan Eliasson. Jan Eliasson has been in the global forefront of diplomacy in every capacity, as foreign minister of his home country of Sweden, as ambassador, as president of the General Assembly, as head of OCHA at the United Nations, addressing humanitarian affairs, as Deputy Secretary General, and as an unbelievable troubleshooter, negotiator, and individual with extraordinary talent and extraordinary heart. And we're thrilled to have you back here because you have graced us with your presence at the first of these conferences, and now you're here just at the moment when your work is coming to fruition of bringing about this global consensus. Deputy Secretary General Jan Eliasson.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for this gentle reminder of my age. I think he was very harsh with you, expecting you to know all the 17 before lunch and at the same time listening to us. So, and my father always said to me, when I spoke too much at the kitchen table back home in Gothenburg, Sweden, he said, listen, son, there's no coincidence that God gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So I thought you would hear them quickly. I take 2 minutes for that so that you can also with your ears register them. a somewhat abbreviated form. Because, you know, the source of wisdom is knowing the facts. So when you then hear me speak, you can perhaps test your memory and test your capacity to absorb. Okay, number 1, end poverty in all forms everywhere. Number 2, end hunger, achieve food security. Number 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. Number 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education, Irina. Number 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Number 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Number 8, promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Number 9, resilient infrastructure, inclusive and sustainable industrialization and innovation. Number 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Number 12, sustainable consumption and production. Number 13, combat climate change and its impacts. Number 14, conserve and sustainable use the oceans, seas, and marine resources. Congratulations, you made it in front of the mirror, Jeff. Goal 15, sustainable use of ecosystems, sustainable management of forests, combating desertification, and halt or reversed land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. That reminded me of Johan Rockström and his boundaries that he wrote about in Science 3-4 years ago. 16, peaceful and inclusive societies, access to justice for all, and a favorite of mine, build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. And 17, of course, means of implementation, financing, and so forth, and revitalize the partnership needed for sustainable development. When Amina and I, who have been working together for the last 3.5 years on this practically every day, we want this to be seen as bricks in a building. You need all those bricks, but in the end, it's a building that has to stand, or see it as an orchestra. We want a symphony. We don't want a cacophony. So everyone, all these goals also represent an instrument that has to be played, but we have to play from the same sheet of music. So that was my help to you to also mobilize your hearing on the 17 goals. Now, I just want to say how glad I am to be here, to see this group here with students, with scientists, with business leaders, with civil society representatives, all of you here to focus on one of the most promising enterprises the world has embarked upon during many years, namely a new transformative development agenda. And I thank President Sirleaf for setting the tone for this, and to have you, a great leader of Africa, a champion of development, recently a fighter against Ebola, successfully concluding her work on that, knowing that you are first a proud citizen and leader of your nation, but you also a true internationalist. I'm so glad that you came here to set the tone for this meeting, because you represent the world where we also need to focus attention. This is what it's all about. Maybe we should come back to that basic issue. We have to end poverty. So and to you, Jeff, the fact that you have this full room, and the fact that when I entered this building, there were at least 500 people waiting to get inside, who I hope are in an overflow room. If not, I hope they will be following on the webcast. But you've done a fantastic job yourself. You have been a fighter on this. Your recent book on sustainability is a wonderful book. I recommend it for reading for those who haven't already. Maybe it's mandatory reading for your courses, of course. But I really say that without your mobilization, being there, not only here, but I feel sometimes that you must meet yourself in the air, because you are in Africa and at the same time you're in Colombia. I don't know how you do it. Maybe it's because of this. or do you know the art of cloning? This is what Secretary General and I are doing the next 2 weeks, to challenge the art of cloning. We should be in two places at the same time. By the way, Irina, thank you for your very warm words about the SG. His passion for this work is enormous, and I see him every day and feel that he feels now that one of his most important tasks is to see the implementation, turning these goals into realities and seeing it in this new context of a transformative set of goals, something that will mobilize not only the whole UN system in an integrated fashion, but also bring in all other sectors. We can't do it alone. We have to do it together. I'll come back to that. Now, many of you, I hope, will also be at the forefront of realizing and living up to these goals, which will be adopted hopefully 2 days from now. In fact, all of us should be engaged, and you are on the good way to do that. You should know that after initial hesitation, which also Jeff expressed from some quarters, articles in Economist and a few others, there is now great excitement and anticipation around the world for the 17 SDGs, which are at the heart of the 2030 agenda. The agenda has already mobilized unprecedented, in my view, energy and momentum across the world and across all sectors of society, and this is just the beginning. We now have at our hand also tremendous help of people who are involved in the communications world. Richard, our friend, who had a fantastic showing of the walls of the UN last night, but also social media. And there are so many people who come out with such great sense of passion and compassion for doing this. We know, as Irina said and others, this is now a question of setting the conditions for future generations. And we definitely have to do it, and we have to do it with energy and strength, in spite of the fact that we live in an extremely troubled world. And we have also tests of institutions, both international institutions and I would say very much national institutions. But we have this debate, and now we are to set the direction for ourselves and for development for the next 15 years. The agenda is, as President Johnson Sirleaf just said, it's universal, it is transformative, and it is highly ambitious. It incorporates the social and economic and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. It aims to promote universal human well-being and to protect our planet. We may have plan B in life, but we have, as I said 3 years ago, no planet B. It is an overarching goal to eradicate poverty in all its forms. It addresses hunger and nutrition and healthy lives for all and aims to achieve gender equality and universal access to quality education. It is to ensure access to clean water and decent sanitation, as well as future-oriented and renewable energy. It includes issues in areas such as sustainable consumption, production, growth, employment. Just think of the enormous challenge of youth unemployment, industrialization, infrastructure, urbanization, migration. These factors were not involved in the MDG work 15 years ago. It links the social and economic and environmental dimensions of the goals on climate change, oceans, and terrestrial ecosystems. The new agenda also links economic and social progress to peaceful and inclusive societies, as well as to human rights, the rule of law, and strong institutions. And this, to me, is an extremely important goal, number 16, because it relates to the basic formula where I was proud to be President General Assembly 2005 and 6, where we in the preamble stated, there is no peace without development, and there is no development without peace, and there is none of the above without respect of human rights. I would today add rule of law and strong institutions. In other words, we have 3 pillars as an agenda for UN and the world, and we have to work on all 3, strengthen all 3 at the same time. That's a huge challenge, but it's doable. It is doable. It must be doable. The SDGs cover issues that are diverse, standalone, but this is important, at the same time closely connected as part of an integrated whole. None of the goals can be achieved in isolation from the others. This sends a strong message. Stop thinking in silos, start thinking horizontally. Yes, we have to be extremely good in the silos, our specialties, whatever we have, and you will have. But in the end, when we solve the problems in reality on the ground in the world, we have to go horizontal and bring in the different aspects of a problem. Each goal, as Irina said, is also related to a number of targets that relate to other goals, creating a web of interlinkages. This calls for an integrated and inclusive approach to policy making and implementation. Now, this is, of course, extremely important. How will member states now take these 17 goals and these many targets? How will they incorporate them in their national economic planning? And how can we, as Jeff said, how can we do it without bringing in the private sector, the civil society, the science, and all the other actors that can make sure that we make progress, serious progress, and in the end achieve those goals by 2030? For example, SDG 6, I must say one of my favorites also, safe water and sanitation for all. It is connected to a number of other goals, both in the MDGs, by the way, and in the new SDGs. They are connected to child mortality, they are connected to maternal health, they are connected to education, to gender equality, and to poverty eradication. 5 of the present 8 goals are immediately related to this issue, and vice versa. In other words, we can also create alliances. When you have your NGO in a certain area, remember that you have allies all over the field, that they are related. And this, we at the same time can be tough and clear on our own work in our own sector, but at the same time see how we are integrated. That will give us the momentum to really get things done. Briefly also, Goal 12 on sustainable consumption production. We can't achieve sustainable development without changing our consumption production patterns. We have to reduce, we have to reuse, we have to recycle to make these goals become realities. So we must reflect the 2030 agenda's integrated nature in how we plan, act, and think, both at home and abroad. In fact, in today's world, I've been thinking about that a lot. During my many years, I've come to the conclusion now that the line between national and international is disappearing, becoming irrelevant. Of course, unfortunately, there are those who think that, no, you've got to look inward and not accept the world outside. But if you look at it, in today's world, look at the complex global challenges, the good international formula, the good international solution, and this is one of them, is in the national interest of member states. You can't even think of a national solution to climate change or the migration challenges. Oh, by the way, Bill Swing is here, a great hero on migration. Right now you are one of the busiest persons in the world. You can't think of them doing that on a national level, not even on a regional level. You've got to go global. So the international solution is a national interest. And vice versa, I would say, creating a good society with peace, development, respect for human rights, and respect of life of dignity for all is the best contribution, not only to make for your own citizens, but in fact for regional economic and international stability and security. So it comes together in a very interesting way, which is, I think, have that as the back of our minds. We have worked in silos far too long. Our mindset has to change into acting and thinking, as I said, horizontally. We should focus on problems and ask who can bring about progress and change, and we should build bridges to all of them and try to achieve an informal division of labor, respecting each other's integrity and comparative advantages. The UN development system is now gearing up, and the UN generally is gearing up to help in different ways at the country level, which is, of course, the most important level, in spite of the fact that the national efforts are also part of international strategy. First, the UN will provide immediate support to governments to implement the agenda, the new agenda, and to reflect it in national development plans and policies at their request, of course. Second, we will support countries to accelerate progress on their development priority areas. And thirdly, we will make expertise on sustainable development and governance available to governments at all stages for this process. And today here at Columbia University, I also want to express my strong hope that the younger generation will be instrumental in taking part in advocating for and implementing and benefiting from, I hope, this integrated cross-cutting development agenda. You can all drive change by better understanding and educating yourselves and others on how things we do in one area affect developments in other areas. Think about your own studies and your research and consider how it touches on various economic, social, and environmental dimensions of development. You will find surprisingly many, many such connections. You all have a role to play. We now need a broad mobilization for change, for a life of dignity for all in today's troubled world. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. It is clear that governments can't achieve this agenda alone. You should know that non-state actors have been actively engaged in the post-2015 negotiations. Millions of people have been around in this process since we started 3.5 years ago. The broader discussions at the UN and very much outside the UN generated, as I said earlier, the basic interest and now the momentum, which we can build on to rally all actors around the SDGs. And for this, we need the involvement of academia to promote informed decision-making and evidence-based policy-making. And here again, Jeff, thanks for what you and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network have played and will play, I'm sure, in your innovative and creative way. We also need the engagement of civil society to help governments serve their people. Remember the first 3 words of the Charter. There's another homework for you, by the way, the preamble of the Charter. You can read it tonight. I have it in the pocket. I don't do it as often as I did last year, I noticed. The pressures here. We the peoples. Remember the first 3 words? That's where we have to come back to all the time. We're here to serve the people, to help bring peace, development, and human rights. We need the support of parliaments, who can provide initiatives as well as checks and balances for governments. I met the International Parliamentary Union leaders, speakers of the union about 3 weeks ago, and I was struck by the fact how important it was for them to create committees in their parliaments, which now have this wider, broader approach to the development road ahead. And they were more than willing to take on that road. In the past, when you had the Energy Committee, Agriculture Committee in the parliaments, they usually worked to the inside. But now we have to put it in the international perspective. So, and also we need the full help from local authorities. It would be great if we could also really have this penetrating into the local communities. And I think here, Ellen, you can play a very great role to make sure that your colleagues in the G77 and in Africa particularly could make sure that this becomes a living concept also on the local level. And in the end, of course, we need the contribution of the private sector. Companies can and indeed must provide and invest in new sustainable products, processes and technologies, not least in the area of communications, as well as health and combating climate change. And in partnership with governments, the private sector has an important role to play, not only to develop sustainable production patterns, but also, importantly, I would say very much important, create jobs, not least for young people. So in closing, dear friends, let me say that the adoption of the SDGs is not an end, but a beginning of a historic enterprise. This agenda is about transformative change everywhere and by everyone, affecting everybody. It calls for actions by governments, parliaments, business world, civil society, academic community, and by people everywhere. Only by working together can we achieve the goals of sustainable development. In today's world, there is no more important word than the word together. I urge all of you to think of ways in which you can mobilize energy and action around this agenda in your daily lives, in your studies, and in your careers. This is a mission supremely worth embarking upon in the pursuit of a life of dignity for all and of a healthy planet with which we live in peace and harmony. And this is the most important mission that I have been ever part of, and I hope that we will travel this journey together. Most of you will be around for 2030. I'm not so sure about myself. I'll try to be around and check as much as I can. But thank you for this great interest.
Thank you. Very nice. Okay, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, thank you so much. Could everybody just stand up for me one moment, please? Okay. Shake a right leg. Shake a left leg. I'm just making sure that this morning's program is sustainable for your body. Now sit down. Okay. 10 out of 10. Excellent performance there. Thank you. The questions are coming thick and fast. Thank you. Let me just show you some of them here. Transcribe them from Twitter. Now, if you don't have a Twitter account and you're in the room and you would like to do and join in the Q&A, do look into your bag or at the registration and you'll find index cards. You can write on the index cards and then give them to the people on the sides of the room and they will miraculously get back onto the stage. So thanks for that. So, how are we actually going to implement the SDGs? There are some experts in this room who will tell you their idea of how it's possible to do it as we just start out at the very beginning. So I'm going to get them to come on stage so you can listen to them. Amina Mohammed, please come up and join me. Amina, sit here. Savish Alpai, please come and sit next to Amina. Stephen Groff. Peter Baker. Pavel Kabat. Johan Rockström. And James Hansen. So, Amina, how tired are you feeling right now?
Oh, not at all.
Okay, very good. Amina is the Secretary General's Special Advisor on the post-2015 development planning at the UN, of course. This has been an incredible journey. Now, how do we do this? How do we implement the SDGs? What do you want to share?
Well, no prescriptions. No prescriptions. I think we learned that from when we started this journey 3 years ago, and it's been an incredible experience and a privilege that the SG actually opened up the door for me to do. So I would say that there are probably 5 things that I would say we need to take real cognizance of as we go forward. One is that this is about countries. It always has been. We've got lots of partners, but it will be about countries' policies, their plans, their priorities, and they will take these SDGs, integrate them, and lift those ambitions so that we can address achieving them by 2030. The second is really looking at what we all agreed in Addis Ababa, the financing framework. This was new. We were always running after the money. This time the money was responding to the ask, and I think you heard Jeff talk about the $1 trillion economy that's out there in the world, and we're asking for very little of it. So the means of implementation are very clear, and we should action that, ignite that as soon as we can to respond to this. The third is going to look at the scale-up of again, corporate business and what they're going to do with sustainability. I know we're going to hear about that, but these are really big partners with innovation that can move this going forward. The fourth, of course, for the UN is about us being fit for purpose. We've led this agenda, and I think it's incumbent upon us to begin to show how, with the paradigm shift that we've had, we do have to learn how to do things differently. We have to conceptually understand sustainable development better. It's universal today, it's not just a north-south conversation, but it's also an integrated way of looking at that, and that's much easier said than done. So who does that mean you bring together at the country? How do we facilitate them, bring the tools that they will need to do this, bring the multi-stakeholder partnerships around the table, from what the DSG had said, the cacophony to the symphony, so we can get things done. But that speaks to the transition, and this can't be something that we do overnight. Last but not least, we have one knot that we haven't tied on this agenda, even as we gavel it on Friday morning, and that's the one to do with accountability. The indicators, the data revolution everyone's talked about is so incredibly important to this. If we mean leave no one behind, then we certainly can't talk about people if we don't know who they are and where they are. The indicators, the measure to hold a non-legally binding agreement in place for us across the world is something that will happen by March 2016. So we still have to hold feet to the fire. And the SDSN has done some incredible work on the indicators, and so we're not starting afresh. The statistical commissions in our countries will have that responsibility. But it will be about joining that data revolution, bringing traditional statistics and data together, and making sure that the technology of big data is with us. I'd say one more thing. Let's not forget that the UN itself, that really has birthed this new agenda, stands on 3 pillars. The 3 pillars: peace, development, and human rights. And I think we have recalibrated the development pillar. It's a response to the really complex world that we have today. There's still 2 other pillars, and as the UN turns 70, we need to be asking, how can we deal with the political decisions that need to write the peace pillar so that we have the right context, and how can we also look at the human rights one, which is fairly cracked these days. I know that President Sirleaf has just left, but I do want to say that for the first time in this agenda, we are talking about context as well. And it does matter for many countries that look at conflict as they're in it or coming out of it.
I like how your questions are getting tougher and tougher as the morning goes along. So Irina, there's no clear reference to disability or people with disability and equal access and opportunities, says this questioner here, in the SDGs. Can this be incorporated? Is it an oversight?
Oh, they haven't read the document. It is there.
Okay. Done and done and done.
Absolutely, it is there. This is about leaving no one behind. And one of the things that we did do continuously was to look at not disability as a burden, but as an ability. And we had these conversations constantly about how it worked across all of the goals, how this became an integral part of policy and planning, and not something that we added on to anyone's plan or agenda. So they are, absolutely at the core of this. This is about people and our planet.
All right, let's move on. Safas Alpai is the Chief Economist for the Islamic Development Bank. Great to have you here on stage. What is the secret sauce for getting started with the SDGs?
Thank you. I had some slides to make it more interactive, just to move it forward in a quicker manner. So can we have it? We have it? Okay. Just 1 second, maybe. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for having this important event here. It's a very critical organization, and I think I have anticipated the question by Jeff, so I am trying to be helpful for you till lunchtime. So all these are on one slide. You can see the 17 goals. But as a professor, I have also another test for you now. So I would like to have a vision test. Maybe it is the quickest test you will ever have. For the next 15 to 20 seconds, I want you just to look at these 17 goals and try to identify the 3 most repeated key terms that you can identify by yourself. So just 15 to 20 seconds. Then let's see if what you identify matches the ones that I will be highlighting in the next slide. As you see now, there are some colored words, the colored ones. Of course, the first one is sustainable. It's not surprising. The second one is inclusive. And the third one is equality. The third one is equality or equity. At this juncture, let me move to a very important data on wealth, global wealth, by Credit Suisse. This global wealth distribution is now being disseminated last 4 years, so we are having a time series data. So as you can see, the global wealth is increasing. If you compare the 2014 level with the 2000 level, it's almost twice. And per capita, we have around 56,000 US dollars, which is a considerable amount of money. But if it was distributed equally. Now, if you look at the next one, which is maybe amazing, only 0.7% of global population, which means around 35 million people, owns 44% of all global wealth. And almost 69–70% at the bottom, they own only 2.9% of global wealth, not even 3%. And what's worse, this distribution is being in this manner in the last 4 years. In 2010, it was around, the top had only around 39%, now they have 44%. So we have a problem here. This is not sustainable, this is not inclusive, and this is not equitable. So the Sustainable Development Agenda, in fact, has highlighted these three terms rightly and strategically. Now we have to make sure that we move in the right direction in the implementation side. Of course, if you compare SDGs with MDGs, there's a big jump, both in terms of goals and both also in terms of targets and also in terms of indicators to be monitored. And this will require enormous amount of finance. And one key implementation factor will be the financing. And it was rightly that we had the Addis Ababa Financing for Development Conference in July this year, even before the adoption of the SDGs formally. And in that context, and it is also rightly indicated by the president of the World Bank, who spoke on behalf of all MDBs, the term is now moving from $1 billion to $1 trillion. So we are moving from $1 billion to $1 trillion, and this requires that we have to incorporate alternative source of finance. So traditional source of finance has to be complemented with new finance systems. And in this context, I would like to highlight, and that's what IDB is also investing in the last several decades, the role of Islamic finance. So Islamic finance is moving into the global financial agenda very highly now. It was also one of the top agenda items of G20 this year. And it will be contributing a lot to the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. Why? Because we need more resources. So we need more resources to finance all these 17 critical goals. But there's also one more dimension that I would like to highlight. If you look at the 2008-9 financial crisis, the biggest damage felt by the poorest people. So whenever we have crisis, the poorest people will be getting the biggest damage. So to be able to move forward and to achieve these sustainable goals, we have to reach a sustainable and stable environment, especially in the area of finance. And in this context, financial stability, financial inclusion, and shared prosperity will be playing a key role. And it is these critical domains that Islamic finance is offering promising solutions. In Islamic finance, financial sector has to move with real sector. You cannot have financial operation without having links to the real sector. So this is very critical to avoid the crisis, financial crisis, especially in the days that we will be trying to implement the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. And in this context, as IDB, we are very pleased that our investment since 1975 on this domain now has become fruition, and the World Bank, the IMF, they are also taking their roles in the promotion of Islamic finance globally. And we will be increasing our investment in this area, and we are very positive that this domain will be very useful in post-2015 agenda. Just last thing, I would like to thank you, all these young people. It's very promising, because without your involvement, we will not be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, as mentioned by previous speakers. We have to have ownership of this process, and it is the young generations who will have this agenda move forward. Thank you.
So Savash, the world is a rich place, and yet we have so many poor people. How will the SDGs make a difference, since the problem is rooted in the selfishness of a few greedy people? Seems a good question to ask somebody who works in banking. Swift answer, please.
Thank you. Maybe that's also linked to my current intervention here. The promise of Islamic finance is here. It is more about moderation, because it is value-based system. It's more inclusive. So that's what we are missing in the current financial system. If you look at, for example, I should name the derivatives. The volume of derivatives, which are not mostly linked to the real sector, was, during the crisis time, $600 trillion, more than 10 times the global GDP. So we were having 10 times higher than global GDP operations in the financial sector, which is not linked to the real sector. And let me also mention here Professor Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard Business School. She mentioned, in fact, Harvard Business School coined this term, financialization. So the real sector firms, after 1980s, are making more of their profits.
So, Savash, I feel like I have a duty to live up to this here. How will the SDGs make a difference, since the problem is rooted in the selfishness of a few greedy people? The direct answer is what?
The direct answer is, it is this inclusiveness
yes.
and the equality perspectives that we are bringing on the table.
Fantastic direct answer. Stephen Groff, Vice President of the Asian Development Bank. Where are you going to take us to next?
Well, thank you, Femi. First, I'd really like to bring us back to some of the things that Jeff said in his talks about what we've seen over the last 30, 40 years in the global economy, but also particularly in Asia, has been nothing short of incredible when you think about the growth that we've seen, when you think about the achievement that is made with respect to poverty incidence in Asia alone. In 1990, we had 55% of the people living in Asia were living in poverty. Today, that's about 15%. So we've seen incredible changes, and the MDGs in many ways are responsible for a lot of the progress we've seen. And yet, there still is a long way to go. And I think that what we're seeing in the advent of the SDGs is a recognition of the fact that it isn't just growth. It's much more than that. And in Asia, while we've seen incredible growth, enviable growth on one hand, there exists a paradox alongside that, where you see this incredible growth, but you see huge poverty that continues to exist. Half of the world's extreme poor continue to live in Asia. And so there's, you see tremendous growth, even if it's reducing slightly in current years. It's still an incredible growth, but great inequality continues to exist. And in fact, inequality is increasing in many of these economies. You continue to have many, many, many millions of people that live without access to clean water, that live without access to electricity, that live without access to sanitation. Millions of children that continue to suffer from malnutrition across that region. So Asia, in a sense, is a crucible for us. It's a crucible because it's an area where we've seen incredible growth, but it's an area where we continue to see deprivation. And so the advent of the SDGs it provides really an opportunity to be thinking about how do we make development much more sustainable, much more inclusive, and take into account the negative impacts of the kind of growth we've seen, whether that be with respect to decreases in resilience to the impacts of climate change, whether we see that in the terms of the contributions that growth has made to increase carbon emissions through the advent of dirtier coal technologies and different technologies that are contributing to climate change. So Asia is a place where we need to test a lot of these theories. And this is something that my institution, other institutions are doing. But I think Deputy Secretary General Eliasson hit the nail on the head when he said that how do we get this agenda incorporated into the national development processes of these countries? And I think this is where the step of actually implementing and executing the SDGs takes place. I mean, there's a lot of positive energy in this room. It's very, very encouraging to see so many people here today, and all of the events that are going to be happening over the course of this week are wonderful. But the true test for us here is not just adopting the agenda, but is actually embedding the agenda within national development processes and procedures and planning within the countries and the states themselves. And so I think a lot of that is going to be incumbent upon institutions such as mine, on organizations such as ours, that we embed this agenda into our planning. And to be brutally honest, this is something that is not yet happening. This is something that is going to take some time. It took time with the MDGs. I think very happily it was successful in the case of the MDGs, but it did take a long time for the MDGs to be thoroughly absorbed and adopted by other development actors in order to help encourage that happening in national development processes and planning within these countries. So this is something that we have to actually jumpstart and happen much more quickly. And so that's really one of the reasons that I'm here representing my institution, why we're here in New York this week, is because we want to have this happen much more quickly. We don't want to wait 3 or 4 years before we fully absorb the import of this agenda within our institution. We want to have that happen much, much more quickly. So that's, I think one thing we need to think about. The other thing I think that's critically important is the question of money and the question of funds. And while we do see, official development assistance is certainly playing a role, many other speakers have mentioned the fact that it's not just development assistance that's important here. It's all forms of finance. Asia has tremendous amounts of finance. It's just finding a way of investing those funds into productive assets that will contribute to the 17 goals at the end of the day. And you asked the question a moment ago about, well, how do we get private money producing or investing into these kinds of poverty, into poverty reduction? How do we get private funds contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals? And that again is a responsibility of many of the institutions that you'll see in New York this week, is that we need to be thinking about how do we leverage the relatively modest amount of funds that we have in ways that can encourage and crowd in the private sector. The private sector typically doesn't invest in these types of things because there's not a return that's involved in these kinds of things necessarily. So there's an intermediation role that our institutions can play that can help make that return, help the private companies, private sector realize the return that they need for their shareholders, for their investors, and that's something I think that we really need to think very, very critically and clearly about. And I think that's one thing that did come out of Addis that was quite positive, is a general recognition of the role that our institutions must play and how much quicker, faster, and smarter we need to be on that agenda more broadly.
Thanks, Stephen. I just want to do a quick poll in the room here. Has anyone heard anything that really sounded great in terms of how do we get started? Yeah. Okay, so you've got your job cut out for you. Peter Baker, President of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. You don't get to be president without a few great ideas. Hit us with one.
So I'm extremely relieved to be here, actually. First and foremost, because the work of Amina and Jan Eliasson is nearly done and we have the SDGs. But secondly, because this is the last conference, I'm going to get involved in talking about what the SDGs should be. Because we've spoken way too much about this, guys. It's actually a pity that the scientists are at the end of this. Because these people, we should listen to them. It's so urgent that we get into an action mode, that we start implementing, that we stop talking, that we even stop thinking about institutions. Let's just get on with it. Because the SDGs are going to be the agenda for the world. And that's the great gift, as I think Jeff said this morning. It's not the UN, it's not the government, it's all of us that have to now start to act. So I run the World Business Council, which has the word business in it. So what are we going to do to get all businesses engaged? Because we also must stop talking about Mr. Paul Polman or IKEA or NRG. We must get all businesses on this agenda. And there are 3 things we need to do. First, we need to very quickly make clear what is the transformation that we're going to have to go through. If you listen to Mr. Hansen later on, in climate, we've made that trip. The deep decarbonization pathways that the SDSN had made, the low carbon technology partnerships that the World Business Council together with the IEA is making. We know what the transformation is. We know what the solutions are. We're working on what are the scalable elements to get them in place. In all honesty, I cannot say that for the other 16 goals yet. So we need to quickly get to what is the transformation and what are the solutions that will make that transformation happen. Secondly, we need to provide all businesses, with tools on how to navigate the SDGs. Because it's all fine in this classroom that by lunch we need to know the 17, but the 17 are irrelevant. It's the 169 targets underlying that are going to make the transformation happen. And no person, well, maybe the smart kids at the back of the room, but no person in business can remember 169 or integrate those in their business strategies. So what are we going to do? This Saturday, I believe it is, the UN Global Compact, GRI, and ourselves, we will launch a thing called the SDG Compass. A very simple tool. Every company in the world can use it, saying, which of these 169 goals are relevant for your business? Where do you have a material impact? And if it's relevant and material, which are the indicators that you need to start measuring and managing? Third thing we need to do, once we know the indicators, hammer them into the reporting and the disclosures of businesses. Let's drive radical transparency on who is into this agenda and who is not. Let's tell the stories about the great things that some are doing. Let's shame the ones who are not doing or are doing bad things. That's where we need to go. We need to stop talking. We need to just start measuring. We need to make better decisions. And we need to create a true sense of transformation. And we don't need to wait till Friday. Goal number 13. Goal number 13 is climate action. Irrespective of the outcome of Paris, we know what the solutions are for climate. All of you know what to do different in your life. All companies are part of a big scheme of solutions. Let's just get to work, scale up, and move fast.
I would suggest you always end on a good applause line. So moving on, Pavel Karat is the director of the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. How do we get started?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And let me just connect to what Peter Bakker said already about doing it yesterday, but starting actually even before yesterday. Did you know that if we agree on number 7 here on Friday, which is energy, we've actually solved about 70%, maybe 80% of money we need to do Paris. I will come to that later. This is about out of the silos, connectivity, integrative system approach to it. My pitch will be today about role and responsibility of academia and science in this important business of transition to sustainability. I'm going to be first extremely self-critical to ourselves, academics. We have been having our enterprise organized around our own system of going for the best science we can have, best published science, going to Nature and Science and all of those very famous journals, publishing, giving the information, informing, and let the governments and society to go with it, to do something. I believe that this is a wrong, ill-based model. Science, namely, should not be only informing, should not be only there to develop indicators about how do we comply with our intentions. It should become a partner, sustainable partner to the process of implementation. We are here together with Jeffrey Sachs and SDSN, with CIASA, which is my institute, to offer partnership. Partnership which will mean that we could provide every single day to the governments, to the businesses, to the civil society, safe lending scenarios for investment. Let me give you one example. 8 years ago, Secretary General asked my institute to put together first ever comprehensive study on the energy outlooks, which became a scientific background for the SC40, Energy 4.0. We are proud of that because it led partly to the number 7 adoption. That study was based on a number of scenarios, 41 of those, which provided the world with a safe lending paths to doubling of the efficiency, doubling of the share of renewables, and full energy access by 2030, 2050. That study was published in 2012, and it was delivered to the United System. It was delivered to the Rio Plus 20. At that time, the price of oil was about $110 per barrel. No one at that time would accept that it may go down below $80. Can you imagine what the scenarios would be now, which leads to the $500 billion investment if we would do the calculations based on the current oil price? In other words, the world is changing as we speak, every single day. And science is ready to stand there as a partner to come to this safe guidance, safe partnership to implement. My first point. Second point, Deputy Secretary General was already extremely eloquent about going horizontal, out of the silos. Yes, out of the silos. It's easy said, but I'm actually having a good message for you. That same study, which I mentioned, Energy Outlook, Energy Assessment, looked not only into the energy goal, it looked together at 4 other sectors, which are all represented in the SDGs, namely energy, climate mitigation, air quality, and health resulting from the air quality problems. Now, bottom line is, if you do all the investment you have to do to achieve energy access by 2030, doubling efficiency and renewables, you need about 0.2% of the global GDP annually, about 200 billion euro. If you do sectorally all your best we have to do in Paris to agree on mitigation, 2 degrees C, you need about 0.8% global GDP. If you do all best you have to do to go down with PM 2.5, air quality, measure megacities, you need about 0.8%. This is what we are doing now. Altogether, we need about 2% of global GDP to do this sectorally in silos. Good message is that particular study showed if you do it upfront in systems, you can save 40% of your money. In other words, there is actually evidence from science that the cross-sectorality, integrated approach, system approach pays off. We put this together, and we are here this week to announce, together with Leadership Council, SDSN, with Stockholm Resilience Center, with 60 other partners, including OECD and EMF, a project called the World 2050, which will step up to this partnership, which will be there for next 15 years to do this particular calculation which are needed to safe implementation of the SDGs. Thank you.
I do not have the answer to this question, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. Why is the panel full of men? What about goal number 5? So this is the point where I get kicked off the panel. And then we have just Irina here. Johan Rockström. Johan Rockström is the director for the Stockholm Resilience Center. He is a man, he's also totally awesome. I feel that you can wear your feminine and your masculine side today to help with that question, that last question there, that had no answer to it.
Thanks, Femi. I won't do a sex change here on stage, but I'm absolutely convinced that there's evidence that if women led the world, the People Planet agenda would have been solved a long time ago. But because I'm nervous, and possibly a top scientist to my right being even more nervous, let me just start by really applauding Jeff Sachs and Jan Eliasson's point that the world leaders gather in New York to celebrate the new age of sustainable development. I think there is evidence that we're tipping the world towards a new logic. It's no longer a question if we're moving towards a sustainable future, it's the pace. It is Peter Bacher's point about the urgency and Jan Eliasson's point about transformation. And I start here because I think the key to start a pathway towards solutions is really to reconfigure our brains in a paradigm shift. And it just so happens I have this paradigm shift in my pocket. It's right here. You can't see it. It's so small. It's planet Earth. You see, we have so much evidence today that just since the last 30 years, we've become a big world on a small planet. We are now in a completely new logic. We're hitting the ceiling of the biophysically hardwired processes that keeps the planet resilient and stable. And the paradigm shift is reflected in Sustainable Development Goals. For the first time, we have an agenda to achieve prosperity within the safe operating space of a stable and resilient planet. And I think if we all can reconfigure our thinking in that way, from business, communities, civil society, young, elder, women, men, nations, then we are on the right path. And I'll leave you, as the typical academic, with an equation and 3 numbers. The equation goes as follows: the Anthropocene plus catastrophic tipping points plus the Holocene equals planetary boundaries. And the Anthropocene is the evidence that we've entered a whole new geological epoch. We are now the dominant force of change. Catastrophic tipping points is the recognition that we've totally misunderstood how the planet operates. We think that we can simply push and abuse endlessly without getting invoices back to the economy. We now know that we push on buttons of irreversible, abrupt, and potentially catastrophic change. We know, since science that was published just in May this year, that we probably pushed one of these biophysically hardwired buttons for the West Antarctic ice sheet, committing ourselves irreversibly to another probably 1 meter sea level rise. We know these unnegotiable tipping points in the Earth system increasingly well, and we need to simply not negotiate with them, but stay within a safe operating space for them. And finally, the Holocene, the 12,000-year period of extraordinary, almost miraculously stable conditions on Earth over the past 12,000 years, is our Eden's Garden, is the reference point that can give us the SDGs. And if you encapsulate all this together, we are the dominant force, therefore we're in the driving seat. We need to avoid at all cost passing boundaries that can take us to abrupt catastrophic changes, and we need to return to Holocene-like conditions. That gives us a planetary boundary framework. And believe it or not, science can define the safe operating space. And if you look at these numbers seriously, that's when you recognize the 3 numbers. We need to be, in 2050, 2060, at a 0 carbon world economy. And we have to have 0 loss of biodiversity to have 0 poverty in the world. And these 3 zeros is what we leave behind for the future. We namely, therefore, want to leave nothing for the next generation. No risks on climate, no risk on biodiversity, and no remaining absolute poverty. And the key issue and the key beauty of this is, as Pavel points out, and Peter as well, these transformations are possible to achieve. And not only are they possible, they can give us a more attractive future. And that is really hopeful. 3.3 million people die each year of air pollution caused by burning coal, natural gas, and oil. So, you know, it's dinosaurs taking us backwards into a future of business as usual. The Tesla future is really the transformation to achieve the SDGs. And that, I think, is the hope, that we can see that innovation towards the SDGs is actually a much more attractive future. So I'll leave you with those 3 numbers, and just to say that science is really stepping up in an unprecedented way in partnership with business, policy, communities, to really make this happen. And as Pat pointed out, the action agenda is right out there. Thank you.
All right, so I am 18 years old. Obviously, this is not my question. In the next 10 years, what will my job be as a young leader in climate change efforts? How will it change? James Hansen, Director of Climate Science Awareness and Solutions Program, the Earth Institute, Columbia University.
Thank you. Let me say that the climate science is very clear. What we now know is that we must leave most remaining fossil fuels in the ground. And that is a huge statement. That became clear. In 2008, we published a paper on target atmospheric CO2. What does humanity need to aim for? And this paper included experts like Jim Zakos and Bob Berner, the carbon cycle experts of the world. And we concluded that the target needs to be 350 parts per million at most, possibly somewhat less than that. Then several years later, a paper was published, 2013, which included economists, 3 economists, including Jeff Sachs, who concluded that that means we have to reduce fossil fuel emissions several percent per year. It's a huge task. And this year, we've concluded that if we stay on business as usual, we are going to guarantee that young people inherit a system in which we're going to lose all coastal cities with economic implications that mean the world may become ungovernable. So, what is the response of the world leaders? I think it was epitomized nicely by a recent press conference in which the Secretary of Energy in the United States and the principal climate official in the administration expressed great optimism about Paris on the basis of the fact that technologies are improving. And in particular, they pointed to carbon capture and storage. That is pure, unadulterated, 100% pure bullshit. The developed countries did not go to the trouble and the expense of capturing CO2, and the developing countries trying to raise their people out of poverty are not going to do that either. This is indicative of the huge challenge that we face in Paris negotiations this year. There's a great danger that Paris will produce an ineffectual Kyoto-style cap-and-trade with offsets approach. There's not talk about doing what is needed. This approach that is still being talked about, the Kyoto-style approach, frankly, is half-assed and it's half-baked. And I say that because it's half-assed because it does not cover global fossil fuel carbon. And it's half-baked because there's no way to enforce it. So it's just paper. What we have to agree on is an across-the-board rising carbon fee or tax. It's the sine qua non. There are many things needed, but without that, you cannot solve the problem. We will not leave the fossil fuels in the ground. If if the major players agree to have a carbon fee, then it's enforceable via border duties on products from countries that do not have a domestic carbon fee. And that's a huge incentive for the other countries to have their own carbon fees so they can collect the money themselves rather than have it collected by other countries at their borders. So, the final thing I want to say is that young people and future generations are standing by and they're counting on us. So the question is, are we going to earn their thanks and their gratitude and their love, or their scorn, their ridicule, and their contempt? And this remains to be determined. We're running out of time. Thanks.
So, ladies and gentlemen, your coffee is that way, but first your panel is this way. Please thank them.